This is Ash Roy, the founder of ProductiveInsights.com. Welcome to the Productive Insights podcast, which is brought to you by the Productive Insights Done For You podcast launch service, which positions you as an authority in your market and successfully turns listeners into high-value customers. Book a call with me on callashroy.com to discuss how we can get started. Our guest today is John McGrath. He's built a really successful business that is considered one of the best in the country and also enjoys coaching and mentoring his business peers and sharing his insights on business. John has written several books and has been a director on the board of realestate.com.au, which is one of the country's most successful tech stories, and now an $8 billion business. It's my pleasure to welcome John McGrath from johnmcgrath.com.au. Welcome, John.
Hi, Ash. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on the show, mate. It was an absolute pleasure meeting you at a recent event and also seeing you speak at the Be Exponential conference. I really enjoyed the stories you shared. You're a great storyteller, and particularly enjoyed your story you shared about a certain actor that you went to school with who's a household name now. So let's talk a bit about mindset and how mindset played such an important role in your success, and how maybe you can weave in a bit of your story about how yours and Russell's paths crossed from when you were young, and how you both have come to become so successful in your various endeavors.
Yeah, thanks, Ash. Well, look, Russell Crowe was the actor you were referring to in my story, and I was fortunate to go to school with Russell, and we've been good friends since we've been 13 or 14, which is nice. And so I've been able to observe his, let's call it a meteoric rise, although not overnight success, as we all know, takes time.
Yes.
And it's been great to watch. And even though Russell's, I guess, in an area where many people would make the false assumption, I think, that you've either got natural gift or talent or you don't, having known Russell when he certainly had no apparent talent in the acting world and seen him work very hard for many, many years to develop that talent, and in my opinion, go to the top of the acting industry. It was exciting for me to have that insight, having known him before he had any celebrity status and before he had apparent acting skills. I guess in my world, I'm not Russell Crowe by any stretch of the imagination, but I guess I look at the same thing, that when I started in real estate, I was one of 50,000 real estate agents in Australia, and no more or less talent than any of the others, but I had a few things I think that have worked well for me. One of them was I was always, I guess, what one might call a big thinker. I aspired to be the best real estate salesperson on the planet, and then when I started my own office, my goal was to be the best real estate company on the planet. And I think it's important to think big, because when you think big, it drives every decision that you make. If you're doing it properly and if you're seriously committed to action, every decision you make, and whether it's the brand of coffee you're serving your clients, the type of furniture you put in your office, the quality of the marketing you do, obviously the quality of the team members or employees, if you will, that you hire. When you're aspiring to be the best, the decisions are of a richer nature. So I think that mindset, at the end of the day, most of us have two arms, two legs, and a decent brain, and the ability to do what we do as well as we can. I think what separates people is rarely any what one might call natural gifts or talents. It's more around working hard, understanding what it's going to take, and having a tough mindset, because execution and the ability to deal with the rejection in our industry, I think like many other industries, the ability to deal with the inevitable disappointments that you encounter along the way. Because anyone that thinks that success is kind of like a 45-degree trajectory where you just keep turning up and getting better and better, of course, is deluded. It's if you double-click on that same graph, you will see that, there's weeks of misery and there's days of despair, and then you've got weeks of elation and ecstasy. And so I think, reality is your ability to control your emotions, to be disciplined about your approach, deal with the inevitable rejections that come with success when you're on the journey, maintain a positive attitude, and Ash, I think it's an authentic positive attitude, because it's not about just faking it, although sometimes you have to kind of just look as though you're happy even when you have occasional bad days. But overall, I think you need to have an optimistic look. You need to be a positive person. You need to be uplifting, because that energy and vibration is going to attract people into your vortex, if you will, including business. And so I think it's really, mindset is critical, and therefore, how does one? I don't think mindset just comes at birth either. I think you've got to work at it, and I think you need to listen to podcasts like yours, and read books, and attend conferences, and do all the things that I think people that get to the top, and just as importantly stay at the top, have to do on a daily basis.
Yes.
I mean, I have a personal standard and ritual that I would generally immerse myself or expose myself to 30 to 60 minutes minimum a day of learning. And
wow, yes, I remember you talking about that.
Right, it starts early in the morning on the treadmill, where I'll put on my listening device and earpods, and then I'll listen to podcasts. And then often during the day, if I've got having a snack at lunchtime, or if I'm on a plane, or at the end of the day, I'll sit down, I'll read, from a magazine or a blog or something. So I'm constantly working, and people often say, how do you have and maintain a positive attitude? Well, it's how do you have and maintain good health in your life? You've got to work at it every day. You don't just go to the gym for a year and think, well, that'll sustain me forever. You've got to go to the gym for the rest of your life, and you've got to eat good food for the rest of your life.
Yes.
And you have to feed yourself mentally good things for the rest of your life.
Yes.
And you have to surround yourself with positive people. So it kind of works to me. It's layer upon layer upon layer of things that one must do to create and maintain a positive energy.
Okay. And, I just want to bring out some really, really valuable things you said for our listeners. The first thing that really struck me, both in what you just said now and your story when I saw you speak at Be Exponential, was about the fact that it takes 10 years or 20 years or whatever to make what they call an overnight success. And none of us are born with this natural ability that we attribute to very successful people. It's hard work. It takes grit. It takes persistence. I know, as a business owner myself, who's been through the trenches the first few years when you're establishing a business, it is really hard yakka, and you've got to be willing to do it, and you cannot give up. What did strike me, though, in what you said earlier on was the ability to think big. Now, I have to put my hand up and be honest and confess that I do fear thinking really big. It scares me. The thinking, really, really big is quite scary. And I guess it would be scary to a fair proportion of people who are listening to this. So what would be your advice to us folks who are a little bit fearful of shooting for the moon and landing in the stars anyway?
Yeah, good question. I think that, you have to shift the paradigm from scared to excited. And how do you do that? I think you've got to remove, or you've got to identify the things that scare you. And I find often fear serves a very valuable purpose, that it asks or it has us question certain things. Now, fear about walking down the middle of the road, of course, is you're going to get hit by a truck, and so you don't do it. But fear about growing a business, starting a business, going for a new role, or any of those things. You need to say, okay, what is it that I'm fearful of? What's the worst thing that could happen, and can I deal with that? And you say, okay, starting a business, aiming for the stars. So let's break it into two. First thing is starting a business. What's the fear? Well, I need to leave a job, and I need to put some of my hard-earned savings into a business which may or may not work. And I need to work extra hours because, in small business and when you're self-employed, it's not 9 to 5 anymore, if that's what someone was used to. So you go through and then you make a list of those, Ash, and I think you say, well, can I deal with all those things? If I were to lose my, $100,000 savings because there is going to be risk in anything.
Yes.
And so you need to be able to deal with that. And my experience is, personally, it's not common that the worst that could happen does happen. Sometimes stuff doesn't go right. In fact, all the time stuff doesn't go right. But at the end of the day, if you look at what's the absolute worst that can happen, that's unlikely to happen. So then let's say we get over the speed bump or the hurdle of taking that risk and going forward. Then the question is, well, if I'm going to open a laundromat, real estate company, whatever industry you're in, why would I not aim to be the best on the planet? I think the real answer there, Ash, for a lot of people is, a lot of people don't aim to do that because they don't want to disappoint themselves. It's not because there's any more risk. If you open a laundromat or a real estate company and your aim is to be in business or the best in the world, there's not necessarily a lot more risk in those things, but there is the risk of disappointing yourself. So
sorry to interrupt you, but there's also that, you become a public figure, you're exposed to a lot more scrutiny. So there's a lot of other things that go with it as well, which I guess some of us, are fearful of. But I guess that's something that comes with the territory. But how do you deal with those things when you're in that situation?
Yeah, look, that's a good point. I think that you're right that if you do aim for the stars and hit them, or the moon and hit it, there will be some adjustments one must make. And again, I would write those down. I'd say, all right, well, all of a sudden, people start looking at me. They look at my business, not just competitors, but other people in the community. And in a small poppy culture where there are, I think, far too many people in the world and even in Australia, where they like criticising people that go out on a limb and become successful. I think you've just got to deal with that reality, and you've got to say that there will be people. Success polarizes. A good friend of mine who was very successful told me many years ago, she said, success polarizes. There are going to be people, and hopefully like many of your listeners who are inspired and want to learn more, that the more successful you become, the more excited they are to know more, and they cheer you on. Yes. There are going to be other people, the small poppies in the culture, where the more successful you become, they get angry. Why is it not them? And they make up things about you, and they throw mud from a distance. From my perspective, that's reality, and you just have to accept that. So how do I deal with that personally? Because that happens to me like it does to anyone else that's achieved anything, I think, in business, is I made the decision that what other people think about me and say about me is none of my business.
I love that. Okay.
My business is to be a good quality. Yeah, it's my view is what I can control, and what I should focus on is being a good person.
Yes.
Good person, good friend, good partner, a good member of the community, good business leader and employer. And all I can do is that. I can control. I remember many years ago, Ash, the late Wayne Dyer, who was one of my favourites.
I read his book, Erroneous Zones. I love that book.
Amazing, and he's got many great podcasts and audio and so forth when he was alive, and of course he's now passed. But he talked about the fact that when he was speaking to an audience, and this was a live cast or a live audio of him giving a speech, and he said, "There's 5,000 of you in the room, and each and every one of you has a different view of me. So I have 5,000 reputations represented in the room." And he said, no matter what I really do and think about, you're all going to have your own view of who I am and what I've done and what I'm doing here in the room. He said, all I can control is the quality of the speech I give.
Yes.
That is, and the energy and the presence I have in the room. So he said, I don't put any energy out there worrying about what are you thinking about me. I put all my energy internally as to how am I presenting the best messages so I can make a difference in your life. So I think you're right. It's in success, you will be scrutinised, and so I guess the fearful bit there, or the warning is, if you are going to aspire to be best on planet, you need to do that with integrity, because if you are living life or working in your business and there is any compromise around integrity, you will be found out, and they are the people that deserve to be found out.
Yes.
But assuming there are many, and the vast majority of people that are in business and are successful are actually living and working with integrity, they will still be subject to people throwing mud. And my view is that's part of the price you pay, and it's character building. And there will be days when you don't want to get up out of the covers because there was something in the paper yesterday criticising you or your business, or something went wrong, or a rogue employee did something which was not favourable, and all of those things are not only possible, they're almost guaranteed.
Yes.
Those or some other variation of those. So you just got to get over that. It's like in sales. If you don't like rejection, don't get into sales, because no matter how good a salesperson you are, there's going to be a level of rejection that goes with that. Because if you're out there pitching your wares and pitching your product and your service, if you want to be successful, you need to pitch it to more people.
Yes.
And the more people you pitch to, you're going to be exposed to more rejection. But that's part of the game, and you just have to accept that and move on. Because the alternative, I think, is a lot scarier, Ash. The alternative is you don't expose yourself out there, you don't grow a great big business, you don't get criticised. But the other thing is you just become potentially, or your business becomes a mediocre part of the business community. And for me, that's more painful than someone throwing mud. I'd much rather be trailblazing and taking the risk and being subjected to anything from criticism right through to ridicule.
Yep.
And that's sort of a character building process, I think.
Awesome. Mate, I just want to just bring out a couple of points which really excited me about what you said. First of all, I want to say that I have only met you actually just once, and I found you to be very personable, someone who had a lot of integrity and was very authentic, and I still are very authentic. And I really appreciate that. The other thing I wanted to say is that I loved what you said about Wayne Dyer for a couple of reasons. One is because I read the book Your Erroneous Zones when I was 21, and it really, really made a big impact on me. The biggest thing that came out of that book for me was what he says about making a choice about what you, to a very significant degree, we can choose what we think in each moment. I mean, yes, if there are extenuating circumstances, our physiology overrides our thinking. But in most cases, in our civilized society, we get to choose what we think. And he says you can choose what you think and what you focus on in each present moment, and you can build your life one moment at a time. And the other thing that I loved about what you said was what other people think of you is none of your business. And I think that's a great way to look at it. I have heard that saying before, and unfortunately, I can't say that I practice that as often as I should. And as they say in sales, if you're too worried about rejection, that means you're too focused on yourself. If you want to be a successful salesperson, you need to be figuring out how to deliver value to your prospect. And if you are delivering value to your prospect, if there's value there, then the sale will happen. If there isn't, it won't happen. I know that's a bit simplistic, but that's essentially what you're saying, isn't it?
I think it's a very good point, Ash, because one of the greatest things, the greatest thing I find out of, achieving some level of success is not the financial rewards. For me, once you get from, which most of us start in, financial scarcity and even in most like mine, and I'm sure yours and most of our listeners, financial pain, which was my initial driver to also do something. You get through that, and then you get to a point where you're no longer in pain and you're living quite comfortably, and then you get a point beyond that where you have some surplus and you might even be in financial abundance. At that point, anything more than that, for me personally, and my experience with most people, is surplus and not going to change your life. I think it changes your life when you go from financial pain to financial comfort. There's no doubt there is a very different experience, and it allows you to do some nice things in life. And so I think that's good. But beyond that, it's really it's kind of what am I going to do with a couple of extra zeros in a bank account? It's not going to change most people's lives. What does change people's lives, though, is when they finally take control of their emotions and their discipline, and when they set a target, there's a strong chance they'll achieve it. So it's who you become in the process of attracting and achieving success, for me, is far more interesting and far more valuable to you as a human being than the financial rewards that inevitably are attached to that as well. So I like the fact that, because I have always seen myself, or I don't know if I've seen myself, there's no doubt that in my youth, I was a very shy person, and I think still today, even in my 50s, I'm a shy person in a social sense, that I'm not gregarious and I'm not an extrovert, and I don't go out, several nights a week and meet lots of new people. I'm a fairly private person. But I also figured out when I was in my teens, when I went to a few courses and I listened to people and I had to do some reflection on myself, I figured out that if I didn't break through some of that discomfort of going out and meeting people and building up some presentation skills and communication skills and my preparedness to be rejected, I wasn't going to be able to achieve a lot of the other things that I found attractive, such as getting into business, getting into sales, doing well at sales, starting a business, growing your business. All those things actually require you to go through those levels of discomfort. And still to this day, do I love rejection? No, I'd be lying if I said to you, look, I've got no more problem, Ash. I love rejection. I can't wait to get the next one. That's not where I think you end up. I think I think what you do end up, Ash, is you get to a point where you say, well, I also am not devastated by rejection as I once would have been.
Yes.
I look at it and I learn from it. In fact, I heard a great saying the other day. I'm sure you and your listeners have heard it, but it was Nelson Mandela, and he said, "I never lose. I win or I learn." And I thought that's a great way of looking at it.
Yes.
And I think it sort of encapsulates the way I feel today. So when something doesn't go wrong, when I lose a piece of business, which happens on a daily basis, when you're trying to employ someone and they go to the opposition or they choose not to go and work with you or whatever it is, all of those things are various forms of rejection.
Yes.
I look at it and I say, well, what did I learn around that? And let's move on with it. And the other thing I've learned to help us and perhaps help some of your audience is I find that the more things you have going on in your life and your business. So if I'm a real estate salesperson, which I am, and part of our business is attracting business in, and then we go and sell it to the buyers. But I need to get the listings, as we call it in our industry.
Yes.
If I have 20 or 30 pieces of business that I'm chasing, which I would typically have if I'm full-time selling, and I chase hard, and each and every one of them is equally important, and I'm passionate about each one of them, and I miss a few this week and I miss a few more next week. If I've only got 3 listings I'm chasing and I lose 2 or 3, it will feel relatively devastating. If I'm chasing 20 and I miss 2 or 3,
yes,
not that I don't mind. I don't want to sound complacent, but in the overall picture or scheme of things, it's kind of much more of a business as usual feeling, and I understand. And if I'm chasing 20, I can't get all 20 pieces of business, and I expect to lose 2 or 3. So I think you've got to have multiple things happening in your life and your business. So therefore, when the inevitable rejection and failure comes along, it's no longer devastating. It's kind of like, let's just move on to the next thing. So I think that's pretty much the way I look at it nowadays.
So you mean, essentially diversification of, put your eggs in more than one basket.
Well, no, actually, no, not exactly, because it's for me, I've always concentrated in terms of real estate's been my thing. And so it's concentration, but having enough activity in your business and building enough of a pipeline, if you will.
Oh,
so
I see.
When things don't go the way you would like to go. So if I was in recruiting and I'm out there looking for new clients to recruit for, if I'm only talking to 2 clients a day and I'm getting rejections, it's one thing. If I'm talking to 50 clients and 10 of them are saying, come and see me, and out of those 10, 5 of them are saying, well, look, let's do business.
I see what you mean.
It's very different. So I guess volume and activity changes your perception and your feeling around, let's call it failure or rejection.
Yes.
So I would very much just say build your pipeline. Every business has got a pipeline, no matter what you do. A pipeline is the potential business and the potential customers you're chasing. So chase it hard, and it's going to be a much greater success story if you're filling the funnel from the top with more opportunities.
Yeah, so work on the lead indicators rather than lag indicators. In this case, the lead indicators are, building your pipeline, and the lag indicators, which you can't control necessarily as directly, is how many of those convert into, a paying customer. I see what you mean. Thank you for clarifying that. Now, I just want to be respectful of your time, and I know that you've got to go in a minute, so I just want to quickly wrap this up.
We have 5 minutes for sure. I'm enjoying the conversation.
Oh,
so
I'm
let's
so glad to hear that.
Another 5.
I'm delighted to hear that. Well, there were a few other things I wanted to touch on, and if it's something you would consider, I would be truly honored to have you back on the show to talk a bit more about systems, which I wanted to discuss, and about the challenges you may or may not have faced separating your personal brand from the business brand, because I know. Something I wanted to touch on was, when Steve Jobs passed away, I always wondered, the Apple was synonymous with the Steve Jobs brand. I appreciate Wozniak was also involved in building the brand, but when he passed away, the stock price took a real beating. And I personally have a bit of a bee in my bonnet about markets being able to tell stock prices, because the Apple stock price went from $200 to $700 in 12 months, and one of them was wrong. Now it's bounced back to $700. So my point is that, this institutional demand drove the stock price insanely down based on one person's death. And I guess my question was going to be, Jobs tried hard to build systems and processes into Apple as a corporation to separate himself from his brand, but eventually wasn't successful. And eventually the separation happened only when he passed on. And, now Tim Cook has taken over and it's starting to see some stabilization and it's going through ups and downs. Have you seen challenges around separating John McGrath from the McGrath brand? And how have you overcome them?
Yes, I guess if we look back for a minute to the Steve Jobs metaphor, and it's a good one, I think I'd argue that he didn't separate himself from the brand by the fact that the share price in a fairly short period of time bounced back quite strongly. So I think there's the emotional part, and as we know, share markets are not terribly rational.
No.
And you're right, a share goes from $200 to $300. That doesn't mean it's 50% better company. It just means there is demand at that time and there's a sentiment. So I think the fact that Apple fairly quickly, if you look at the overall history of Apple and the period that the shares did drop after Steve Jobs' death, it probably rebounded to indicate that people actually believed, as much as Steve Jobs was absolutely vital part of its success, people recognised that there was a business beyond Steve Jobs. I think the same with our business, and I would like to think, and maybe it's my ego speaking, but I would like to think that people see that I do play a vital role, and I certainly play a role. But beyond me, there is a brand and an amazing team of people and a set of systems and processes and so forth that is well and truly disconnected from me and will live on with or without me, if anything would happen to me. So I think that many great businesses are, for a long period of time anyway, are very closely associated with their founder. And Apple is a classic example. Virgin with Richard Branson is another classic example. You could even say Mark Cuban's companies in America, very important examples. It's not uncommon for great businesses to be attached very closely. But the greatest businesses obviously evolve beyond that, as Apple has done and as Virgin has done and so forth. But I think, so for me, coming back to my perspective, I in the early days, I never thought about that because I was just excited. When you've got a tiny business, you don't have those thoughts, and then you get to a little bit bigger. It does get to a point in your evolution, I think, Ash, you're right, where one thinks about, well, is this healthy for the business and for shareholders and for staff? And the answer is no. Inevitably, you need to make sure you have processes and people and marketing and systems that extend well beyond you. So theoretically, if you no longer cease to exist, then the business continues to not just survive but grow and thrive. So I really focused on those things, and yet, still today I'm very involved in the business. But if I was less involved, the business would continue to flourish. So I think it's a good point. It's not something that keeps me up at night. When people say, does it worry you of that? I say, no, because I know the business will thrive without me, but I have no intention of going anywhere. So it's an interesting thing, but for probably most of your audience and listeners, I think the concept or the prospect of building a business that may well be founder driven and your profile as a founder may or may not, because it's not essential that you have a high profile founder. But if you happen to be a high profile founder, it's not something that I would say should concern you.
Okay, that's great advice. So look, there's been some really awesome insights. We can talk about, how systems build a business that endures past, a founder and so on, which I believe is an integral part of creating a business that is valuable and saleable and that eventually can be decoupled from the founder. It's all about building, bulletproof systems, awesome organizational culture, and values. I would welcome the opportunity to talk about that another time. But for now, I just want to, draw out some of the key insights we've had from this conversation for our listeners. So the first one for me was think big. And if you as a listener have any concerns about thinking big, well, think about the risk of mediocrity. We all want to contribute something to the world, and there are risks with becoming very successful, but what's the point if you aren't trying to be the best in the world at what you are? And I really was inspired when you said you decided that you wanted to be the best real estate agent on the planet. Now, if you want to be able to do that as a listener, you can do something. What you've done, John, is you listen to podcasts and have 30 to 60 minutes of learning every morning. You try and maintain an authentic, positive attitude, and that's not just lip service, but that's actually having an optimistic outlook. You quoted Nelson Mandela, where he said, "You either lose or you learn. You either win or you learn." I think that's the ultimate positivity in terms of mindset. You mentioned that success polarizes, and being aware of that is a pretty valuable thing to understand. It allows you to frame events that happen in life and to understand that other people's opinion of you is none of your business, which I think is a wonderful little phrase to carry around with you if you're looking to become someone really successful. Um, and coming back to your point about success being polarizing, when you try and be successful, there's a certain proportion of people that will want to pull you down because it's effectively demonstrating to them that they are not going to be that. And you need to be able to discern yourself from those people and say, well, okay, I need to make a choice and say, well, I'm not going to listen to that person saying, oh, no, Ash, you're insane for quitting a job in finance and banking, which, by the way, was my background, and starting your own podcast and starting your own business in content marketing. And I mean, I've got a CPA, I have an MBA, and I've quit all that to do what I'm doing now. And a lot of people said I was insane. They still think I am. And read the book by Wayne Dyer, Your Erroneous Zones, and listen to this podcast and try and take some action steps. And hopefully we'll have you back on the show again sometime, John, and maybe we can talk some more about systems and other things.
Well, it'll be a pleasure, actually. If your audience enjoyed this conversation, if that's the case, I would love to come back. If they hated it, well, they'll never see me again, I guess. But
I doubt that, mate. I doubt that.
It'll be a pleasure. I enjoyed it, and I love what you're doing, and I appreciated you coming to introduce yourself the other night. And that's exactly how stuff happens: is someone makes a decision and they have a vision. So it was great to be there. So we'll finish up now, but you let me know how it all goes, and I'll look forward to perhaps a return bout in the near future.
Okay, well, you're a real gentleman, John. It's a pleasure to have met you, and thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ash. Look forward to it. Bye-bye.
See you, mate.